We know that the younger a child is given a mobile phone, the more likely they'll be diagnosed with ADHD. And the more time a teenager spends on a phone or on a device, the more likely they'll get diagnosed with symptoms of ADHD. And there's now a lot of discussion in the research area about whether or not we should split it up, and there should be the diagnosis which is based on the genetic component versus the diagnosis which is actually not because of genetics, but rather is because of environment, and is because of the fact that they were given devices early and they spend too much time on devices. So that hasn't happened yet, but there is a lot of discussion in the area about whether or not there should be two different disorders.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show Dr. Mark Williams. Mark is the director of Rethinking Your Brain and has worked with thousands of students, teachers, health professionals, and company directors who want to understand how their brain works and how to perform optimally and maintain a healthy brain. He has published a ton of articles. He's worked at MIT. He's worked at multiple universities. Like, this man has been around and he knows a lot about neuroscience. And today we're talking about the neuroscience of emotions, the impact of technologies like the smartphone, and what this has to do with our brain and how our brain is functioning and how it affects like how our brain is developing. This was such a great conversation. And Dr. Mark is really talking to us about the long-term effects of the technology that we have in our hands and in front of our faces every single day, and how we can really optimize what we're doing and how we're using it to help our brain so that it is working for us and not working against us. So many good takeaways here. Let's jump in.
All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Mark, and we are talking. I'm really excited because I kind of want to nerd out, but we're going to talk about neuroscience today. Mark is like the neuroscience expert here, and I'm excited for what he's going to teach us today. Thanks so much for joining us today, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Hope. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So I was telling Mark before I hit record, I lost my voice yesterday and it's just not coming back. So I'm going to try to let him do all the talking because I know you came here to listen to him anyway. So we're going to let him teach us, and I'll keep the talking to a minimum. But let's kind of start with, because we're going to kind of dig into some neuroscience. And again, I love to nerd out on this stuff, so I'll let you kind of go there with us. But can you just give us just kind of a background of what you do, how you got into this field?
Yeah, so I'm cognitive neuroscientist. I did a double major in psychology, which they sort of call soft science, although it's not very soft, it's pretty hard. And then I did neurophysiology, which is a hard science. So it was before there was really cognitive neuroscience was a discipline. I'm showing my age now, aren't I? Yeah, cognitive neuroscience is a pretty new discipline. So there wasn't really any degrees in that. And so I did those 2 degrees and sort of put it together to end up as a cognitive neuroscientist, which just means that I look at humans and human brains rather than looking at animal brains, basically. And then I got really interested in, how we perceive emotions and how we communicate and how we are able to do all the things we do. I mean, we are, the amazing species we are because we collaborate and we're able to actually, communicate with each other and do all these crazy, crazy things now because of all of that and what's gone on for so long. That just fascinates me, how we do that and how we do most of that automatically and don't actually realize it.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. And that's what I'm excited to dive in with you because it fascinates me too. And I think, I think oftentimes we underestimate how like interesting the human species is. Like we look at animals and we go, study their behavior, but it's like humans are equally as interesting. And like you said, like so much of what we do is just like automatic, right? So I love the conversation that you bring around like technology and how that's affecting our brains and kind of like the neuroscience take on that. Can you kind of dive into that piece a little bit and kind of the impact that, when we're surrounded by it, right? We can't avoid it. And no, it is, it's lovely. So I could speak to you here in Australia when you're in Australia, but can you talk about what it's doing to our brains?
Yeah, it's a really interesting area because it's something. I mean, it's a new technology that is, as you said, it's amazing new technology. But we've never had a new technology that's taken over the world quite in the same way as this has, especially the mobile phones or the cell phones. We've had things like, the combustion engine was a huge change in society, but it took 20, 30, 40 years before even a large percentage of people had cars. So we had a long period of time where we actually worked out, hey, these things are actually dangerous and we need to have controls over them. We need to have licensing and we need to have all these other things. So there's a long period where we actually went through and governments went through and went, hey, these are the things we need to change. And with, TV as well, televisions weren't really, available that readily for a long time until we got, all the stations and so on working and so on. So we had a long period over which we worked out what was going on and how these things worked and how we actually wanted to control them. Whereas with these devices, they came on and pretty much within a couple of years, they were universal. Everyone was sticking them in their pockets and walking around with them. And I don't think we've really thought about how we want to use them and what's the best way to actually use them. And there's a whole bunch of, very, very influential tech companies out there that are using them in a way which is really not beneficial to us and are very beneficial to them. And so we need to have a rethink about that. One of the big problems is the social media, because social media is not social at all. I call it unsocial media because it actually makes us unsocial, right? It actually stops us from being social. And we are social animals. I call us the connected species because of the fact that we've got to where we are because of our connection. And we have a large brain because we needed to be able to connect with each other. And that means that to actually keep our brains healthy, we need to connect. We need to actually connect, but face to face. Because when we connect face to face, we activate more of our brains than anything else we do. And actually getting together face to face is actually better for us than anything else we can do. So having someone that you trust and you sit down with face to face and spend time with can increase your lifespan by up to 10 to 15 years. Just having someone you sit down, with
That's
and
crazy.
actually chat with, which is crazy, right?
It is.
Such an easy thing to do, but we're doing less of that than we ever have in the past. It'll also decrease the likelihood of you getting Alzheimer's disease or other neurodegenerative diseases later on. And it decreases the likelihood of you having mental health issues. So the best way and the best cure for most mental health issues is actually sitting down and chatting to someone face to face. And it's better than any drug we currently have on the market. So, it's really important that we do that. But these phones and social media are actually driving us apart. They're actually keeping us in our rooms and they're keeping us in our houses. And they're making it too easy not to socialize, but we need to socialize more because it's causing huge problems for our brains and huge problems for us as a species because we've got to here because of collaboration, but we're not collaborating the same way as we have before. We've also got a big problem, productivity is going down. So we know people are less productive today than they have been in the past. And so that, again, is because of the mobile phones and the devices. And there's really easy ways to change that, right? One of the things is if you turn off all your notifications and don't let your phone notify you of things, then you actually improve your mental health within 2 weeks. So within 2 weeks, you'll get an improvement in mental health just by turning off all your notifications, and you'll get an improvement in your productivity. So there's some super easy ways to actually change these things. It's just the way, as I said, the way they've been designed and the way that we use them because of the way that they're set up so that the tech companies can make a lot of money isn't actually beneficial to us as individuals. And we need to change those things.
Yeah, that was a huge one for me. I did that. I think it was maybe a year or so ago. I went in and turned off all my notifications. I was actually literally just having this conversation this morning with one of my clients because she was like, we're at my Pilates studio and all her phone's like blowing up from like work emails. And I'm like, dude, turn off your notifications. You don't need to see those over doing this. And so that totally was the biggest thing for me because it's like automatically anxiety inducing, like, all these things popping up on my phone. So that's a huge one, just the notifications piece.
And it's also eating into your life, because
Right.
we know our working memory is very limited. So what you're aware of at any one point in time is what's in your working memory, or you can call it consciousness. It's more, colloquial term. And so your working memory is what you're aware of, but that's really limited, and it's really, really limited. So when you're listening to me, hopefully the listeners are listening to us, they won't be noticing everything else that's going on around them.
Right.
And if they get attracted by something, if something notifies them, or if somebody interrupts them or whatever, their attention drags their working memory to that other thing, because we can't multitask. Our brains are incapable of multitasking. We're constantly switching backwards and forwards. But every time that happens, every time you get a notification or anything that distracts you, anything that shifts your attention, you lose the last 90 seconds of what you were doing. So the last 90 seconds gets lost, which is why we then have to go, oh, what was I thinking about before?
Yes.
Because you've lost that last 90 seconds. Now you think about how many times during the day you get a notification or you get interrupted. That's 90 seconds of your day that you lose. So you're losing a huge amount of your day through all those notifications, which is why we're all so busy now, but we're not getting anything done, because we don't have 24 hours anymore. We have much less because of all those notifications that we're receiving, which means that our days are much shorter than they were before. Whereas if you get rid of all those notifications, you get your day back, you get your whole 24 hours back, which means you don't have to be working 16, 17 hours a day. Because you're not actually working that much, you're actually just getting distracted that much.
Right. That's huge. That's huge. I mean, oh my gosh, you think of that, how much that adds up. That's insane. 90 seconds of really, and that makes total sense. And of course makes total sense. We're saying we're so much less productive than we've ever been before. We're so easily distracted. Well, and I also think, and I'd love to hear your take on this, I also think, like, and this is just me coming from like the functional medicine world as a functional practitioner, like, the ADD, ADHD thing keeps coming up like rampantly, adults, kids, you name it, whatever. But I feel like, and this isn't to dismiss people's symptoms or anything or to like minimize it, but I feel like a lot of times it's not that we're like, so many people are clinically have ADD, ADHD. I think we're all just so easily distracted, just period. Like we're just so neurodivergent just because of, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We know that the younger a child is given a mobile phone, the more likely they'll be diagnosed with ADHD. And the more time a teenager spends on a phone or on a device, the more likely they'll get diagnosed with symptoms of ADHD. And there's now a lot of discussion in the research area about whether or not we should split it up, and there should be the diagnosis which is based on the genetic component, which is versus the diagnosis, which is actually not because of genetics, but rather is because of environment, and it's because of the fact that they were given devices early and they spend too much time on devices. So that hasn't happened yet, but there is a lot of discussion in the area about whether or not there should be two different disorders. One, which is more of a digital ADHD rather than a clinical ADHD.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me.
Which makes sense.
It makes total sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that was the point I was making, and you just said it. I feel like so much of it is just our environment. It's not necessarily, now granted, of course, there is always a genetic piece to things, but I think so much of what we're seeing now is just the environment. It's how we're being, like one of my client this morning, she was talking about the kids in school, and her kid is in public school, in middle school, and the teachers now, and I didn't know this was a thing because my kids aren't that old yet, but the teachers now are like their kids get done with their assignments, and the teachers are letting them like get on their phones after the assignments just because it keeps them quiet. And I'm like, is that the best use of, like, I don't know. I mean, I get it from like a behavioral standpoint. You're like, I want to keep everybody quiet. But it's like, now we're just like now we're like telling them, hey, get on your phone. And, I just I thought that was crazy.
Yeah, here in Australia, they've just been banned in all schools.
Really?
So,
That's impressive.
New Zealand's about to ban them. They've been banned in China as well. In Spain, it's really interesting because several provinces in Spain, they ban the mobile phone, and then there's multiple provinces where they haven't. So it's a beautiful experiment being done over there, where you can actually look like across public schools and private schools and across different, wealth areas and all that sort of stuff. And they've shown that after banning the phones it's across hundreds of schools, after banning the phones, you get a decrease in cyberbullying, which isn't surprising, right?
Totally, yeah.
But you also get a decrease in normal, like just the normal bullying. You get an improvement in mental health and you get an improvement in educational outcomes. So the kids are actually learning better in those schools and those provinces where they actually ban the phone. It's a really interesting study from a scientific point of view, because it's a really well controlled study, because you have all these large provinces where they've banned it and others where they haven't, and it's in the same country and so on. So
That's cool.
There's some really strong evidence now that getting rid of the phone from schools actually makes a huge change in both mental health issues, which is rampant in schools these days.
Right.
And also educational outcomes, which is really why they're there, right? And it's like, if they're there to actually learn, then anything that helps them learn, we should have, and anything that doesn't help them learn, we should get rid of, right?
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
There is changes in some countries, and then other countries aren't doing it yet, but hopefully will soon.
Yeah.
But I work in a lot of schools, and I was working in one school, and it was a really interesting a economics teacher with his year 12 students, so his final year students in high school. He actually got them all to, just because he was showing, he was doing some thing with economics that I don't understand, but he got them all to count how many times they got a notification, and then they worked out how much of their time they'd actually lost, and went across this classroom, which I think was about 25 kids, in just that 50-minute class. I think they lost about 7 hours of time.
Oh my gosh.
Because of all the notifications that went off.
Crazy.
Yeah, this was a couple of years ago before they started banning them. But he was trying to demonstrate to them, how much time they're actually losing because of not only their notifications, but everybody else's notifications that are going off in the classroom as well.
That is nuts. 7
hours.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
That's crazy thing how much time we're wasting. Well, and to your point about the mental health, I feel like for me, that's of course the learning part, but I feel like that's my main concern is the mental health piece, because it also, that sets you on a certain trajectory for later in life, the mental health piece. And I just know, like, hearing stories of, again, my kids are little, so they're not that old, but hearing stories of clients and friends who have kids in middle school and high school, like the cyberbullying thing is like out of control, and it didn't exist when I was in school. We didn't have Facebook, we didn't have any of that. We had cell phones that could text, and that was the extent of it. And it's just a whole different animal dealing with the cyberbullying thing.
Yeah, it's really shocking, and to decrease that, and there's a lot of people who are trying to, here in Australia, they were trying to stop the bans on the mobile phones, and they were arguing, you're not going to stop the cyberbullying because they'll do it once they get home.
Sure.
But a lot of the studies actually show that most of it actually happens at school, because that's when they take the photos and that's when they take the videos and that's when they are actually interacting, and doing those things. Whereas when they're at home, nobody's going to take a photo of you. Nobody's going to take a video of you doing something funny or silly or whatever.
Yeah.
And when I was young, all that silly, stupid stuff you did, there was no recording of it. So you got away with it, right? Everyone forgot the next day. Yeah. Whereas these days, they all do videos of it, and they put it on TikTok, and they put it on all sorts of things, which causes huge amount of damage to these poor kids.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's you're never going to stop all bullying. The bully's always going to exist, but I think it's just the whole it's minimizing it and then not giving them more opportunity for it to happen by, like you're saying, having the phones at school and recording and all that. I just think that's a huge, because it affects, as adults, our phones, even just the notifications piece, that affects our mental health, the anxiety and the stress of it, it's affecting our mental health too as adults. So why would we not think that would happen, to kids?
Yeah, and especially because the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain, I'm going to start getting nerdy again, but it's the area of your brain which controls our attention. It's a prefrontal cortex, and that isn't fully developed until we're 25.
Right.
So these kids don't have properly functioning prefrontal cortex, so they're even more susceptible to all these attentional capture things that are happening to them every day, and they need to develop that. So you need to develop an ability before you can actually then sustain it later on when you're an adult. So we were lucky because we didn't have the phone, so our prefrontal cortex developed normally, and then we're just trying to sustain it now, and we're even having trouble doing that. But if they never develop it in a way that they can actually control it, then they're never going to be able to then sustain it later on, which is really the worrying part of the whole thing. And we do know that there are some brain changes occurring because of the phones that could affect them more long term, and that really worries me, and we're not really sure what's going to happen because we haven't had them for long enough.
That's what I was going to ask you. So you're saying that this stuff that's like by kind of shortening that development of that prefrontal cortex, it's actually changing their brains.
Yeah, so it does change it, but we actually know, which is really scary. It was actually done in the US, and there's a big NIH study now ongoing looking at the fact that they discovered that kids who have devices, young kids, toddlers who are on devices, who parents give them the devices to actually watch stuff and all this, they seem to be developing their white matter tracts, which are the corpus callosum stuff, which is the areas that connect the different areas together, and they're white because they're covered in myelin, because it's sort of like the freeways of your brain in a big city rather than the little cities, rather than the little streets. So these connect the different areas of your brain together and are really important for processing speed and all these things. Those areas are abnormally developed in kids who are actually given devices early on. So those areas they're not the same as somebody who doesn't get a device early on and doesn't learn to read and think early on. And so, the NIH now is doing, from what I know, a big study on that because they're very concerned about that and what will happen to these kids later on because their brains haven't developed properly in those first 10 years of life.
Right.
Which is a real concern.
Yeah, that's crazy. Man, that's crazy. So I want to go back to something you said earlier, because you were saying that this is like kind of not really switching topics, but I remember you said earlier, you were talking about how the face-to-face contact, how, devices are kind of keeping us from that face-to-face interaction, and how that is kind of directly proportional to, basically our length of life, right? And so, during the pandemic, when everybody was locked up and we were locked down for so long, and, though there was a big mental health crisis, and I think we're still kind of in the thick of it, things coming out that have been affected long-term from, things that happened during the pandemic. But I'd just love to hear your thoughts on, because I know like we used things like Zoom and FaceTime to be able to, talk to family, and we would do that with our family and all that. Is there a difference, or what is the difference between, like you're talking about, like sitting down, having face-to-face conversation and doing that through a device? Is there a difference?
Yeah, huge difference. So when we meet someone face-to-face, the first thing we do is, before COVID, the first thing we did was we would actually touch them, because in all societies we have some way of appropriately touching someone. So you either shake hands or you kiss each other on the cheek. Even the Inuits will rub noses because it's the only part of their body that's actually showing. And the reason we do that is we've got C fibers on our skin, and all mammals have C fibers, and they're just there for touch. So they're there for touch, and what happens is when you touch someone, the C fiber activates, and that activates an area of your brain which releases oxytocin. And oxytocin actually helps us to connect to the other person. So we actually feel more comfortable connecting with them, and we feel as though they're part of our in-group, and we trust that individual. So when you're online, you don't get any of that. And now a lot of people don't, shake hands and stuff because of COVID. And we need to get back to actually appropriately touching each other, because it's so important for that neurotransmitter to be released. And so that's the first thing that happens. And then we have the mirror neuron system, which activates because we can see the person's whole body. And the mirror neuron system is an automatic system, which it activates the motor area of our brain that links what they're doing to how we understand it. So if we were actually face to face, I'd see your whole body rather than just your head. And if you were like leaning forward and slumped over, then the area of my brain that would make me lean forward and slump over would activate. So then I would feel the same way as you. So I would understand, you're feeling a little bit depressed because you're slumped over, and that's not the normal way for you to do it. And so we then understand what the other person's feeling, and we get serotonin released in association with that, so that we can actually, connect with the person better in that situation. We'll also start mimicking them. So because our motor system is activating in the same way as their motor system, we'll start doing the same things. And as I said, I speak a lot at schools with especially with teenagers. And I was at one school just recently, and the front row had a whole bunch of boys, and they're all mates, and they're all sitting exactly the same. And you notice that, right? Teenagers, you'll get one group of teenagers will be acting one way, and another group of teenagers all act in another way, because they're showing that they're part of the same group through this mirror system. And that's what we do when we're actually face to face. But you can't do that online, because you actually don't see what the person's actually doing behind the screen. And so we get this serotonin as well, which we don't get online. We do get dopamine when we're online, but dopamine's not actually the best of neurotransmitters. It's getting a bad rap. It's not as bad as it is in the media, but it is getting a bad rap, but it's not good. And also eye gaze. So here, when we're talking like this, if we're actually face to face, I could look over there and start talking about what's over there, and you would understand what I'm actually talking about. But you don't get any of that information when we're online, because you have no idea what is over in the corner of my office, because you can't actually see it. Whereas when we're actually face to face, and if there's more than two people, face to face, then the eye gaze actually tells us a lot about who's going to talk next, and who wants to talk next, and who's talking to who, and so on. And we don't get any of that information either when we're online. Often people's camera is in the wrong spot as well, which makes it difficult. A lot of people put their camera down low. And if it's down low, then it looks as though the person's actually looking over you. They're actually standing over you, which of course is a very aggressive stance if you are face to face, and people don't realize that is actually causing issues as well. And all these issues, we don't realize are happening because they're automatic, right? They don't actually it's not like our brain's going, hey, that person looks as though, it's all automatic, and it's a physiological response that happens. And so we actually then feel pretty crap afterwards. So I like to talk about fast food versus, home cooked meal. And doing it online like this is sort of like getting fast food. It's really easy to do, and you get this hit of dopamine, but then you feel pretty crap afterwards, and it's not very good for you long term. Whereas actually meeting up with someone face to face is like a home cooked meal. It takes longer, but you get all these really good nutrients from it, and it actually sustains you for longer. You feel better afterwards rather than feeling crap afterwards. And it actually does increase your lifespan, which is pretty cool as well.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So, I think we need to really think about spending time with people more often and more regularly, because it's so important for us. And you get that all those really important neurotransmitters released, and it's a real imbalance of neurotransmitters when we do it online, which is why it doesn't feel as good afterwards.
Yeah. That's crazy. I feel like that's the stuff we need to be teaching kids in school. I don't think anybody really understands or even knows. A lot of people don't know, but now you do, because you're listening to this episode. The number, that there's neurotransmitters involved in face-to-face interaction, and being like, that's great. So, and I love that, because I have a brick and mortar Pilates and fitness studio, and in conjunction with my nutrition practice. And, after the pandemic thing, things are closed down forever, and gyms had to stay closed for forever. And, we come back in, and a lot of people now have decided that, they would rather work out online at home rather than come in person. And that everything you were saying, it just in my head was just confirming everything, because we're, me and my instructors, my team, we're all like, it's so much better in person, blah, blah. There's actually science why it is actually better to come in person. That just confirmed all of it. That's crazy. I love that. So you mentioned one before, you were talking about the notifications. Is there anything else that you can share with our listeners on how we can, I don't want to say how we can undo things. I think we are where we are. We're in this age of technology. So, we just kind of live with it, but things we can do to help protect our brains and those parts of us with this, age of technology we're in.
Yeah. So the number one thing, the best thing you can do for your brain, as I said before, and the thing that activates more of your brain, therefore keeps it healthier, is just meeting up with people regularly on face to face. So actually organizing that you actually just go and have a coffee or whatever, go for a walk or whatever you want to do, or go to a Pilates studio rather than doing it online. Do that regularly. Do it at least once a day. Meet up with someone outside of your family group that you actually trust, and you can actually just have a chat with, because that is better for your brain than anything else you can do. Also, things like putting on. I'm a huge fan of knowledge, right? And so turning on those health app on your phone, which actually monitors what you're doing online, it's really good, because then you get notified once a week, and you can actually look at what you've actually been doing. And most of us don't realize, and you sort of look at it and go, geez, I spent 6 hours on Facebook this week. Maybe that's not the best of my use of my time,
Right.
maybe I'll, change things, and then change things based on that, right? And then you actually have the knowledge, you have the power, and so you can actually change what you're doing based on that. Because most of us don't realize how much time or how much of our life we're literally wasting
Totally.
on those different apps. And I think just seeing that, I think, scares a lot of people into actually doing something about it, which is really important, right?
Yeah. It's a wake-up call.
Yeah, absolutely. And then have time when you don't have the phone. It really stresses people not to have their phone. It's almost like it's a toddler or something.
It is like
and
it's your, you're exactly, you're blanking.
It's like crazy. Yeah. I actually saw some stat the other day, and I was talking to someone else, and they were like, yeah, it's happened to me, but that 10% of people will actually check their mobile phone when they're having sex, which I was just stunned about.
Oh my gosh. What is happening to people? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was like, really?
Oh gosh.
That is bizarre.
It's bizarre.
But just having a period. So I have teenage kids. All my teenage kids have their phones set so that at 9:00 at night they turn off, and so they can only get phone calls and they can't do anything else on it.
Yeah.
And then it turns back on at 7:00 in the morning. So you have that period of time where it just doesn't work, except for your alarm, which a lot of people use it for alarm, and for phone calls. So if there's an emergency, someone will call you. Yeah, but otherwise you can't use it. And I think that's a great thing to do as well, where you have a period of time where you're just away from it and you're not using it each night, where you can just sit down and spend time with people. And it's not going to distract you if you're doing things.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Those are such good tips. Thank you so much for sharing those. Okay, so I do have one more question that I like to ask everybody as we finish up. But before I do that, can you let everybody know where they can find out more about you, learning from you? You've got lots of great information. You've got programs teaching all of these things. So where can they find out about all of that? Yeah,
if they just go to Dr. Mark Williams, so drmarkwilliams.com. That's my website, and there's lots of stuff on there that they can download, or they can join my newsletter, which is free. Or they can check out my new book, which recently come out, which is The Connected Species, How the Evolution of the Brain Can Change the World. And so, that's got a lot of this stuff in it. And each chapter has a tip on how you can get more connected with your community and everyone around you.
Love that.
Lots of tips and tricks in there.
Yeah, that's perfect.
As well as the science.
Yeah, the science. And I love all the science. So that's right up my alley. Of course, I have links to all that in the show notes for y'all, and go pick up that book. Cause I mean, it is going to change the world. I mean, it's like you said earlier, I think we're not going to really know the long-term effects of us living this age of technology until however many years later. But I would hate for it to us get to the end and be like, well, crap, like we could have done a lot of things, better to, give ourselves a little bit more longevity and vitality. So I love that. And the human connection is a big piece. So I love that. Okay. The last question I want to ask you, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Oh, that's a big one. Know where you want to end up. I recently wrote a piece, and I write my obituary every couple of months. And by writing my obituary, it actually gives me a real sense of what I want to focus on. Because when you write your obituary, it's not like he was a great workmate, or he spent a lot of time at work, or he made a lot of money, or anything like that. It's all about the important things in life. And so I think it sounds really morbid, I know, but actually it isn't at all. Because it gives you direction. Because if we don't have direction of our own, then we follow everybody else, or we get knocked around by everybody else, right?
Yes.
And so we actually need to know where we want to be, and knowing what you want people to say about you when you pass away, right? When you leave this earth, it really does give you direction. And it makes you go, hang on, I can get rid of all that stuff because that's not really interesting to me. And that's not where I want to be headed. This is where I want to be headed. And these are the things I want to focus on. So, I think that really does give you hope and purpose. It gives you a direction as to which way you want to go, and stops you getting distracted by all the stuff, because there's so much noise out there.
Yes, I love that. I actually love, it does sound morbid when you say it, but I actually love that you write. I think that's so insightful. So I think that's a really cool practice. I like that.
Thank you.
It's very cool. Thank you so much, Mark, for this. This was such a good conversation. I mean, I could probably talk to you another 2 hours, so I'm going to get your book so I can just teach myself. So thank you so much for this wisdom and this insight and just what you're doing to help us just live a more connected life. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me along, Hope. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I'd love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I can know how to provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics you'd like to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza, or you can visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.